There is something living in the silence, not a metaphor, something real, psychological, and deeply specific to you. Every time you fill a quiet moment with noise, you're keeping it at a distance. Every playlist, every podcast, every reflexive scroll is a wall between you and it. Most people spend their entire lives never letting the silence get loud enough to hear what it's actually saying. This video is about what happens when you finally do. Let's start with something you probably do without noticing. You get in the car, music on before the seatbelt clicks. You walk to the kitchen, podcast playing before the kettle boils. You lie in bed, phone in hand before your head hits the pillow. None of these feel like decisions. They feel like defaults. And that's exactly the problem. Because the moment something becomes automatic, you stop questioning it. You stop asking why. And the why, in this case, is the most important thing. Because here's what the noise is actually doing. It isn't relaxing you. It isn't entertaining you. Not really. It's occupying you. There is a difference. Entertainment gives you something. Occupation takes something away, specifically your attention. And when your attention is fully occupied by external input, there is no bandwidth left for internal experience. No space for your own thoughts to surface. No room for the thing you've been keeping at arm's length to finally step forward. The noise isn't a reward. It's a buffer. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable, because the question is, what exactly are you buffering against? Researchers have studied this with remarkable consistency. In one well-known study, participants were left alone in a room with nothing but their thoughts for 15 minutes. No phone, no music, no reading material. Just silence in their own mind. The results were striking. Most people found it genuinely unpleasant. A significant portion rated it as one of the more difficult things they'd been asked to do. Some couldn't complete it at all, and in a follow-up variation, a number of participants chose to give themselves mild electric shocks rather than continue sitting in silence. They chose physical discomfort over mental quiet. That finding is not a curiosity. It's a map. It tells you something precise about the relationship most people have with their own inner world. The silence wasn't the problem. What the silence contained, that was the problem. Their own unfiltered thoughts, their own unprocessed feelings, the things they hadn't looked at directly in weeks, months, sometimes years. The noise keeps all of that in a waiting room. Silence opens the door. And this is where the psychology becomes deeply personal. Because what lives in your silence is specific to you. For some people, it's anxiety, a low hum of worry about the future that, when given space, grows loud enough to feel unbearable. For others, it's grief that never fully resolved, old guilt, decisions that were never made, versions of themselves they abandoned somewhere along the way without a proper goodbye. For others still, it's something simpler and somehow harder: emptiness. The terrifying possibility that when the noise stops, there might not be much underneath it. And so the playlist starts again. The autoplay kicks in. The scroll continues. Not because you're enjoying it, but because the alternative, actually sitting with yourself, feels like something you're not sure you can survive. Here's the part that nobody talks about. Avoiding your inner world doesn't make it smaller. It makes it louder. Every thought you don't sit with gets louder in the background. Every feeling you buffer against builds pressure behind the wall. The noise gives you the illusion of relief, while the thing you're avoiding grows. You don't hear it, but it's shaping your decisions, your moods, your relationships, your sense of self, all from behind a wall of sound you voluntarily maintain every single day. This is why people who never sit in silence often feel vaguely out of control, like life is just happening to them, like they're always slightly behind themselves, reacting instead of choosing, drifting instead of directing. It isn't a character flaw. It's the natural result of never giving your own mind the space to speak clearly. You can't hear yourself think when you never let yourself think. And then there's the identity layer, the deepest one. Because silence doesn't just surface uncomfortable feelings, it surfaces uncomfortable questions. Who am I when I'm not performing? What do I actually want? Not what looks good, not what I'm supposed to want, but what I genuinely want. What am I doing with my time? And does any of it actually matter to me? These questions don't arise when you're distracted. They only come in the quiet. And for a lot of people, the noise isn't just avoiding feelings, it's avoiding answers. Answers that would require change. Answers that are easier not to hear. So, what do you actually do with this? Three things. First, shrink the buffer gradually. You don't need to sit in silence for an hour on day one. That's not courage, that's overcorrection. Start with 2 minutes. Sit in your car before going inside. Lie in bed without your phone for the first 3 minutes of the day. Let the discomfort exist without immediately reaching for relief. You're not solving anything in those 2 minutes. You're just practicing the act of staying. Second, get curious instead of resistant. When something uncomfortable surfaces in the silence, the instinct is to push it back down. Instead, ask it a question. What is this? Where did it come from? What does it want me to know? You don't have to have the answer. The act of turning toward it instead of away from it changes the relationship. The thing that felt like a threat begins to feel like information. Third, and this is the one that compounds over time, let silence become a practice, not a punishment. Most people experience silence as something that happens to them, a gap, an absence, an awkward void to be filled. The shift happens when you start choosing it, deliberately. 5 minutes in the morning, a walk without headphones once a week, a meal without a screen. Every time you choose silence on purpose, you send yourself a message. I am not afraid of my own mind. And slowly, over time, that stops being a lie. The thing living in your silence isn't a threat. It never was. It's just the part of you that only gets to speak when everything else goes quiet. And that part, the one you've been drowning out with noise, with distraction, with an endless stream of content, that part knows things about you that the loud version of your life never will. The silence isn't empty. It never was. You just haven't listened long enough to hear what it's full of. If this landed somewhere real for you, share it with someone who hasn't sat in silence in longer than they can remember. And if you want to keep going deeper into the patterns running quietly beneath your life, stick around. There's more where this came from.